probably is not as easy as they thought, because people are going to be liable to heavy penalties, as we may be discussing later in the show.
Victor, what are your thoughts?
Thank you. While regulation is a global standard and expected, but how far have we gone as a country in using law to ensure regulation? I mean, how many laws do we have that have ever helped us in achieving what we wanted to achieve? That's the challenge. So regulation, yes. And why, again, when we are talking about self-regulation in most of our industries and professions, self-regulation, why this time criminalize an aspect of communication? Because we believe there were inside laws even outside the new channels and technology. If people fought in a market, there used to be, there is a law in our country that would deal with that. So the same thing, we still have defamation laws in this country. So if anybody was going to insult anybody online, the same soul. So do we need a new law to deal with that? Those are some of the challenges. But yes, regulation is important and it's needed.
All right, before we can quickly bring you up to speed with other stories that we believe are important at this hour, Dr. Murithi, just your thoughts.
Well, I feel like the act has been overshadowed by the issues of false information, which is a legitimate concern. But I think we need to understand where we're coming from. Kenya is a party to the Budapest Convention, which is the convention signed in 2001 that required that the parties deal with the issues of cybercrime. At the time, you have to remember September 2011, the bombing of the Twin Towers. And so they needed a law that would help us to criminalize online activities that related to cybercrime. They needed countries to improve their surveillance powers, and they needed coordination and cooperation between countries to be able to prosecute terrorism and things like that. That is where we're coming from, and that is what is not being talked about. And so the big thing is that there's, for you to be able to do these things, you will also need to collect the evidence and preserve it. And some of the times, terrorism and other cybercrimes happen in such a fast pace that you're not able to follow procedures like court orders and things like that. And there's a recognition that in as much as, yes, there's a national security interest, there's also an intrusive way in which some of these things can be done. And so you need serious safeguards. And Article 15 of the Budapest Convention requires that states, when they're legislating for this, put the safeguards. And the question is, do we have adequate safeguards in this legislation for that?
All right, gentlemen, this conversation is just starting, and like I said earlier on, we're going to open our phone lines. So if you're watching at home, you can also be part of this conversation, share in your comments or your questions. But first, heavy rains continue to pound several parts of the country, leaving a trail of destruction, with the weatherman predicting that heavy rainfall in the counties of Turkana, Marsabit, Samburu, Mandera, West Pokot, Elgeyo Marakwet, Trans Nzoia, and Uasin-Gishu. An early advisory from the Kenya Meteorological Department had projected that heavy rains between Monday and Tuesday. Kenyans living in flood-prone areas have been put on high alert. On Tuesday, KMD said that the station in Murang'a County had reported the highest rainfall amount, ranging from about 55.4 milliliters to 151.7 milliliters, leading to landslides in some parts. In other news, the Director of Criminal Investigation could start arresting suspects in the multi-billion NYS scandal between Monday and Tuesday. Police have been questioning suspended officers in relation to the National Youth Service scandal, on which billions of taxpayers' money may have been lost. In other news, the Director of Public Prosecution has filed an appeal seeking to overturn the acquittal of evangelist James Nganga in a case where he was charged with causing the death of a woman in a fatal road accident. The DPP appeal has been filed at the Kiambu High Court. Chief Magistrate Godfrey Odor dismissed the case on 4th of this month, citing inability of the prosecution to place the clergyman at the scene of the accident. Now, the Education Committee will today hold a meeting with the University Academic Staff Union, UASU, over the proposed amendments to the University Act. The meeting comes barely a week after the lecturers ended the 78-day strike that had paralyzed learning in all public universities countrywide. Now, in other news, Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg told the EU on Tuesday that regulation was important and inevitable, meeting the leaders of the European Parliament. Zuckerberg said that the question was not whether there should be regulation, but what kind of regulation there should be in response to questions about whether Facebook ought to be broken up. He also said that Facebook would be compliant by Friday with the new general data protection.
Should be regulation. I think the question is, what is the right regulation? I think the internet is becoming increasingly important in people's lives. Some sort of regulation is important and inevitable, and the important thing is to get this right, and to make sure that we have regulatory frameworks that help protect people, that are flexible so that they allow for innovation, that don't inadvertently prevent new technologies like AI from being able to develop. We do expect to be fully compliant on May 25th, so in 3 days from now. We've had a large team working on this inside Facebook to make sure that we're compliant.
I think it's a very important question in this round, the market power of Facebook, and the question if you cross-use, for example, data between Facebook and WhatsApp. So it would be good if you say at least one word to that.
And now to that story that is setting stage to our newsroom discussion this morning. A petition has been filed in court challenging the legality of the Computer and Cybercrimes Act signed by President Uhuru Kenyatta last week. The petitioner cites that lack of public participation and threat to fundamental rights and freedom as reason for seeking the revocation of the new law. The petition was filed Monday evening under a certificate of urgency.
A week after President Uhuru Kenyatta assented to the controversial Computer and Cybercrimes Bill, the fight to have the laws quashed have been taken to the court through a petition by lawyer Geoffrey Minor. In the 10-point petition, the applicant argues that fundamental rights and freedoms of many Kenyans will be under threat due to some of the provisions of the Act. These include the right to privacy, freedom of expression, freedom of the media, and right of access to information. The petitioner raises concern over the hefty penalties that come with contravening these laws. He says, even more worrying is the fact that the Act sets out harsh penalties, including fines of up to 50 million shillings or imprisonment of up to 25 years, which might serve to impede right to access of information under Article 35 of the Constitution, as whistleblowers may fear they would be subject to these punitive sentences. In the application, Minor also holds that there is need for the court to provide a remedy, in particular due to the fact that there is a general presumption that every act of parliament is constitutional, hence its implementation is immediate. The lawyer also accuses the act of falling short of international standards and requirements and violates treaties and conventions in which Kenya is a party to, contrary to Article 2, 5 and 6 of the Constitution. The applicant puts on the spot the Attorney General, the National Assembly, the Director of Public Prosecutions, the Inspector General of Police and the National Police Service as respondents in the petition. This comes as other groups that feel targeted by this act prepare to head to court to challenge it. Akisa Wandera, KTN News.
All right, so we're asking you this morning, do you understand the Cyber Crimes Act? Tweet us, call in, we want your thoughts and for you to be part of this conversation. Victor, do you think that even after calls from the media, from the journalists, from interested parties, asking Mr. Kenyatta to revoke this law, do you think that this will happen?
I mean, it's now law. They already passed it. So the thing is, while people are exploring various ways, there are those who want to go to court, that are already gone to court. There are those who are saying, like us in the industry, we are saying, we just need to reorganize, develop a comprehensive memorandum, and reach out for dialogue with the parties concerned, largely OP and State House, over the matter, sharing experiences of how regulation. You've just had that presentation by the Facebook CEO, the president, that the discussion is, we want regulation, yes. The issue of regulation is not, debatable. Yes. In all industries we need, but how best? This is a new area, like Wakili said, and rushing, for example, where was the cabinet paper that clearly spelled out how this law will be effected? Was the Kenya National Research and Crime Institute involved, just to help us understand that passing the law in its current form would help us achieve what was intended? As we move to digital, and we are saying we are a digital country and economy. Look at the budget, how much money has been spent on helping Kenyans use that ICT responsibly. So that we are also saying, while we are embracing new technology, which we can't run away from, but as a country, how much are we spending in helping Kenyans understand and reap from that industry instead of criminalizing it?
So, Dr. Murithi, what's the way around this, the legal way around this? So it's been passed, it's now a law. A lot of Kenyans have called out saying that this is going to infringe on freedom of speech in 2018. What's the way around it?
I mean, the litigation was expected because this was during the time that there was a public participation about the bill. There was a lot of back and forth and resistance about the then Section 14, which is now the false news provisions. And Parliament was adamant that this needs to be included. And we've not had just one, 2, 3 times the courts say criminal libel is just unconstitutional. So I think this will be pretty straightforward. The court will move on to declare that those sections unconstitutional.
But there's also the issue of public participations, whether Kenyans did not participate as such when it came to this. Explain to us, and even more so our audience, why it's very important for Kenyans to be part, to participate, come out before a bill is then even passed into a law. Why it's critical and why it's important for Kenyans to then participate on such public forums where before a bill could then, tie the hands of Kenyans.
It's really important because then they get to be able to have a voice and to say what they feel about the law. So the problem right now is that we don't have a public participation regime. We have a bill in Parliament, but we don't yet have something that is solid. The Constitution provides for this. But so whatever it is that is done, sometimes it seems to be lip service. But that said, I must say that we have a Parliament that is listening right now. The committee, the ICT committee at Parliament has been listening and has been taking our views. For instance, we were able to get the provision on searches without warrant removed from this bill. So that is really important. And the thing with public participation is that it has to be substantive. It cannot be seen to be just, we tried to get comments and then we did our own thing. Because here now there's provisions of the bill that even people that were involved in drafting the bill were totally surprised when the final act came out. So for instance, the committee on cybercrime and the Cybercrime Committee is an entirely new provision. It's an entirely new section. It only constitutes of government operatives. The Budapest Convention says that there needs to be safeguards to the legislation. One of the safeguards I would give you here is who is going to check this committee? Where is there not a member of the civil society, the Kenya National Human Rights Commission, for instance, represented there?
Right.
Other people are not represented. Public participation is meant to make sure that everyone that has an interest, anyone that can give sound judgment to a legislative process is present at the table, not after the fact, before.
Speaking of being present at the table, Thomas, as someone who is an expert in this field, when you saw the law, this cybercrime law, do you feel it's more of a personal benefit towards the members of parliament, towards our politicians, and not generally there for the sake of the public?
As we said, and as everyone has said, it's important to have regulations. But as Mark asked, what sort of regulations are we imposing on people? And by the way, sometimes the members of parliament have this tendency of passing laws just for their short-term benefits. This has been witnessed before, but it should not be the case in every sphere. Cybersecurity sphere is totally different, and little do they know that sometimes it can come back to haunt them, and they'll end up being the biggest victims. And I stand with Kenyans. I understand their outcry, but we also need to understand what exactly this bill is addressing.
Exactly.
We have several aspects of it, but there are those, of course, which have been most of concern. We can talk about computer fraud. We have child pornography.
Which have been well addressed.
But talk about false publications.
Yes.
This is one of the things that Kenyans are picking and talking about. I don't know if it's because we have the affinity to fake news or something. But
I'm glad we have Victor here. Yeah. Because, Victor, we keep singing freedom of speech is being imposed here.
Before Victor comes in, just imagine this scenario where mainstream media publishes a report on their website, perhaps. It's an accident on Mombasa Road. And without verifying, I simply go and take up that link and share with my friends in my social media network. And the law says, if I publish false publications, then I'm liable to the law, to that crime. I mean, really, will I still be liable when I simply got this piece of information from mainstream media?
So there's still loopholes in that law?
I mean, yeah, there are quite a lot. So experts need to be involved, and even the general public to be able to give their view.
Victor, I'll say again, I'm glad that you're here. We keep saying that, you know, this specific law, as much as, yes, it is, you know, going to tame child pornography, cybercrime activities, which in the world loses about 60 trillion Kenyan shillings in terms of cybercrime. That one aspect of what fake news is, and we haven't even defined what fake news, that could see you go to jail for 2 years and pay a fine of close to 5 million Kenyan shillings. Could you paint for our viewers just an image of what this could do to freedom of speech, the implications that it can have?
It's huge. It's huge implication, because one of the things that my colleague raises is how far have we used existing laws to deal with these crimes you are talking about? If it's an issue of false content, and in fact, globally, Kenya is a member of the UNESCO team at the UN level, is a member state. And UNESCO has given very wide guidelines about fake content. Once it is fake, it's not news. So those are the already guidelines which the government could have borrowed from in terms of dealing with some of these issues. So the bigger challenge is who determines what will be fake news and who determines. Because, and the thing, like my colleague said, that this thing can be a double-edged tool. We have seen fake content, both from state and non-state actors.
That's the thing.
So what then happens when you have seen, like he said, a road accident scene where the OSPD says it's 5 people dead, and you have seen 6. So who is wrong? Who is now will be liable for false news? So those are some of the challenges that people need to explore. And that's why I was saying we rushed to pass the law, while we needed to have regulation, like we are saying, but we are quick, because if you look at most of the provisions actually in that law, are some of the provisions that media members before Kenya Union of Journalists, editors went to court, because some of them are just picked from the existing kicker, from Media Council Act, from Defamation Act, from Books and Newspaper Act, from POTA, that's the Anti-Terrorism Act, from the Proceeds of Money and Laundering Act. It's just, they have just picked a few things and again made it into a law. Some of them are sections that were declared unconstitutional under the Security Amendment Act 2014. So like my colleague said, people will go back, why do we want to incur more expenses in litigation when there were better dialogue ways of achieving the same regulation?
I want to encourage you at home who is watching to really be part of this conversation, because at the end of the day, it still affects you as a common man. We're going to put our phone lines there at the bottom of your screens. Please feel free to call in. Let me just rope in Dr. Mudhiri here. As a lawyer, the key aspect here is that even as a nation, and I love what Victor has said, we haven't defined fake news because you still find the state in itself still publishing sometimes stories or information that is fake news. If we're going to say that fake news is then false information, then how do we go about to enforce this law if we haven't even, as a country, said, okay, so what is fake news and what is not fake news?
The problem here is that the larger problem, let me say, from a philosophical perspective, is that ICT in this country is growing at a faster rate than any other thing.
Yeah.
Sure.
So we need to recognize that it's pervasive and it'll affect every other sector, right? So then this act should be about the integrity of computer systems and making sure that we're safe online, things that he would do. But now the problem is when we start putting substantive issues that belong to other forms of legislation into the bill, making it like a boilerplate act. So, for instance, I've tried to do some research about how other jurisdictions are approaching this. There is no federal law on fake news, let's say in the US or something like that. If you talk about, let's say, cyberbullying, you shouldn't really talk about it as a cyber-related issue. You should talk about bullying. And as a society, we should talk about bullying substantively and define it and define how we want it regulated. This means that, for instance, California has regulated bullying in general, whether online whether
or
offline.
Yes.
So you see what happens is, for every realm of regulation, there's going to be an ICT-related aspect to it. There's going to be cyber bullying. There's going to be cyber squatting, which is in copyright.
Financial crime.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So there's scenarios here. You can either target a computer system as a scenario to commit a crime, or you can use a computer as a tool to commit a crime, right? If I want to steal the intellectual property of KTN, I am just committing intellectual property crimes using a computer.
Whether online or offline.
Exactly. If I want to commit fraud, I want to steal your credit data, I just use a computer. There it is a tool. So the issue is more substantive on than whether it was done using a cyber-related means.
Okay, so a lot of you have also sent in your comments here. Michael Karanjo, you say that no, in regards to do you understand the Cyber Crimes Act, and you go on to say that hope that I am safe posting my comments here. I'm guessing whether your comments are safe. Evelyn Kasina goes on to say that the cybercrime bill has good provisions. We have to acknowledge that we need to start from somewhere. We are in the fourth industrial revolution. Can it be improved? Yes, yes, yes. I want to pose that to you. Yeah. Can it still be improved? Like you said, because there are already a lot of loopholes.
Definitely, yes. And this is at a time when the confidence levels in the judiciary are a little high. And since we have that recourse, Kenyans have already gone to court to litigate. And we are hopeful. At least we hope the court is going to point out those aspects that are not in tandem with the tenets of the Constitution, and then those can be addressed.
James, on Twitter, you say, honestly, cybercrime has brought a big confusion to the local people who don't read and understand it, since they need deep explanation. Lastly, I have not understood all the cybercrimes. James is being honest there. He hasn't understood all the cybercrimes. Yeah. So those are just some of the feedback that we're getting in regards to our Twitter poll question this morning. Victor, let me just loop you in here with how this will then go to affect, and I'm glad what Dr. Mudhuri said, that it's not even just an issue of it being a technological term. We should be able to deal with bullying even outside.
In general.
In general.
That's the thing.
So here we have a country that has quite a high internet penetration, one of the biggest within the African continent. In the world, dare I say, we perform even better than Australia. So internet penetration, we're good. We have a growing population online at about 22 million Kenyans. It has caused a lot of people do business easier, communication is much more easier, leave alone this infringing freedom of expression. What will this then do to just the internet space here in Kenya?
Largely, it will reduce usage of the technology we are thinking about of expanding. Because even before we started this discussion, and even from the comments you see, people are already scared.
Of
we
posting.
are
If
not
it's
so
safe
sure.
to
Yeah, I
even
mean,
post a
am I
message?
safe even to send M-Pesa? Am I even safe? You know, and that's principle. Are we using law for advocacy purposes or for correction? So because what that law has done already is to scare people. You are not so sure of what do I use, which is not okay. We are running a project, actually, which I've seen has been done in Russia and elsewhere, about media literacy, about these things we are talking about. Okay. We want to reap from ICT, but are we investing in helping people understand ICT well? So that then we are spending more to promote. I mean, like I was telling you, how much are we spending in helping people understand the M-Pesa Foundation, for example, Safaricom's and Airtel? How much are they to help people understand, I mean, that culture, that when you receive money that is not meant for you, you need to return. Because if we say you will be arrested, sometimes you send money to somebody who is very literate. What is the literacy level in this country? Yeah. And how many of our people in the village, you know, when you have sent M-Pesa to return, the process of returning. So you'll be arresting and jailing somebody. Okay, ignorance of the law is not a law, but illiteracy. So what we are doing is, again, encourage people to use ICT, but at the same time tell them, don't use ICT if you are not literate.
And
Thomas,
I think sometimes what adds up into this fear is sometimes the rogue authorities that there be. That sometimes they take advantage of the laws, they tweak them just to serve their selfish interests. Just imagine, like, when we talk about the false publications, it's that subjective. And as a case in point, I'm not saying anyone is rogue, but just so recently, our good friend, Honorable Dr. Mutua, visited my home county, Kisii County.
Yeah, we saw that.
And the bridge on which they were standing collapsed. And then there's news. They were almost drowning. I mean, that is so subjective. But the governor went ahead to record a statement, you know, wanting to
even threaten the journalist.
to threaten and sue these journalists for, according to him, publishing fake news. But if indeed that water was as much, they would have drowned. So where do you draw a line? And people went on to, you know, cyberbully him and say he's petty and so on and so forth.
Now that's the thing.
Making
Wasn't
it
he
even
not
worse.
being petty? Will we see our members of parliament abusing this law for their own good? So it's not even there for the sake of protecting our children from cyberbullying or cybercrime. Instead, there they put in fake news for their own good. Don't you not think, Dr. Mudui, we'll see our politicians abusing this law? And I'm glad that Thomas has already given the latest example that we saw with our friend Mutua.
I think just before Doc comes in, one of the things we have seen in most of our media-related laws are the spur of the moment kind of approach. You know, that I have an issue with somebody, then I push a law that will be pushed to purely sort out a personal matter. And we make it into a law. And we are seeing it in the Media Council Act, we are seeing it in the Kenya Information Amendment Act, now the Cyber, the Parliamentary Privileges Act. There are quite a number of laws where a few people had a few issues with individuals. Then they use their parliamentary whatever to make a law that was purely to sort out a personal issue. And this is exactly what this act is, because if you look at the history and even the discussion in Parliament, you would see people bring out emotions about the experience they have had with a blogger or somebody. So it's not a policy-related issue. It's purely to sort out a personal issue.
Let me get his feedback on that, on abusing this law.
Exactly. This law has been in the making for about 4 years. Yeah. And we've had enough time to consider all these issues. But I feel like there's no coordinated approach. First, you will have, the thing is you should have a strategy paper that sets out the things that need to be considered and why. Then you have a policy paper that then discusses the substantive issues that should be legislated on. And then you have the bill proposed. But in Kenya, sometimes
we start with the law.
The bill comes after the act.
And you know, after having it for about 4 years, it only came to pass after the members of parliament have been
exactly. So people feel it was opportunistic.
Yet Kenyans were being bullied, cybercrimes.
Yeah. So there's that feel that there's no good faith because it feels like it was an opportunistic move. Yet things like data protection, we've been clamoring for this since the draft in 2012, which is meant to protect our data, which is being misused, has not been passed, right? So
you see the hurry in the cybercrime, but there's no hurry to legislate on the data protection. So you see where the priority is.
And just to set the records right, it's not like anyone is honestly against the passage of this law because we want regulation.
True.
But we want to emphasize on how exactly it's done,
All right.
process.
We encouraged you to call in and be part of this conversation because it's quite important. And we have Jeffrey Wandari calling in from Moranga. Jeffrey, thank you so much for your time this morning. What are your comments or your questions in regards to the Cybercrimes Act?
Yeah, I felt that people, if you want a united nation, people must must stop this business of cyberbullying.
Okay. Do you think that as a Kenyan that this will infringe on your personal freedom of expression if you were to post a comment on Facebook or on Twitter that was fake news?
Come again?
Do you think that this new Cybercrime Act will infringe on you personally as Jeffrey, your freedom of expression as a Kenyan?
Yeah, of course. If you have to express yourself, you have to be reasonable. You must know that you are also infringing the quality of the nation.
And don't you fear that your politicians will then go ahead and abuse or misuse this law, and whatever is tweeted about them, be it criticism, now turns just into fake news?
Well, politicians, they have a wide field of using words, but then they must also stop. They must know that they have the duty of uniting the nation.
All right, thank you so much, Jeffrey. Victor, let me loop you in here. And here's the thing. Who or what mandates the effect of a certain post or information? For example, what if it's posted out of satire? What if it's posted out of criticism? If I was to criticize my governor, Sonko, on how he's handling the city. So you have satire, you have criticism and ridicule, then who or what then says, okay, so this post is incorrect or it's fake news?
You have parodies.
Or parodies, that's the other thing.
And those are the challenges we are talking about. How do you determine, I mean, like we said, political speech against hate speech, for example? What is the experience, and the lawyers are here to tell you, the challenges national cohesion and integration are having under the Evidence Act to prove some of these things.
Right.
I mean, quite a number of people who will have a criminal mind to use cyberspace would have already prepared. We have, like Media Council, we do those follow-ups of monitoring. And many of these sites that people purport to be having problems with are not even registered in Kenya. I mean, those guys have that brain. They will go and register those things in the US, in the UK. And so the issue of jurisdiction comes, how do you charge them? So we have already such cases even at the Media Council where people have brought against a number of sites, but those things are not registered. So exactly that's what people will do. And I saw one of the colleagues, an avid online user, who was already advising people on how, if you need to survive this act, how you need to register a parody account from outside, and how you can use encryption
and
to
Victor,
still issue the same document.
Sometimes you do not even need to go anywhere to register it. I mean, we are going to go through some interesting times. And you know, hackers are such intelligent, and it's a game they like. I'm not advocating for anyone to hack, but I know, I'm in the technology space, and I know what happens. Sometimes you can even use a VPN, a simple network, so that the computer you are using
is not traced.
Is not traced. I mean, the IP that can be detected is different from what you are using. You could be seated here in KTN, and you appear to be tweeting from somewhere in Kansas or somewhere.
We had a few cases, even not even just sites, mainstream media houses. Many times when these international media houses want to do maybe a critical story on the country, they have offices here as BBC, Al Jazeera, CNN, blah, blah. They all have offices. But when they want to do a very critical story or controversial story in Kenya, they will send their team from abroad. They come and do the story here and go and post on their website in Doha or New York.
And before we get the legal aspect of it, Timothy in Kimayo, who is calling in from Marakwet. Timothy, good morning. Thank you so much for calling in. What are your thoughts on the conversation that we are having here in studio?
Thank you so much. I want to say something to do with cyber crimes, and it is very important to understand that every Kenyan has a right of privacy. And this bill, I think this law has it's actually a challenge because every Kenyan every Kenyan has a right to privacy, and it doesn't make sense for this law to infringe into the rights of all the Kenyans. And at the same time, it's very important for Kenyans to understand that cyberbullying is not, it's not something good. It's not something good. So it is very important that we understand that we have to, we should not do things that are contrary to what the law says. Yeah, but it's important to understand that it's infringing into the rights of a Kenyan, yeah?
Timothy, how often do you use the internet? Are you on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook?
I'm on Twitter. In fact, I'm an active user, by the way. Yeah, I normally use Facebook, Twitter, and what I normally do is that I am very careful on what I post.
So do you think that now you have to be 10 times more careful? You can't post satire, funny things, that this will probably infringe your right of expression?
As you can read Article 31, 31, 33, talking about access to information, talking of issues of privacy, I have the right to express myself.
All right, thank you so much. Now let's talk to Michael Johnston, who's calling in from Kibra. Michael, good morning.
Morning, how are you?
Michael, are you personally on any social media site, be it Facebook, Twitter?
Yes, I am. Ever. I use it.
Now let's talk to Michael Johnston.
Hi. Hello.
Hi, Michael. Michael, reduce the volume of your TV just a little bit.
I am trying to do that. Yes, how are you? Hello.
Hi, now I can hear you. Go ahead.
Good. My first point is that I expected this matter to have involved all Kenyans to discuss before it was approved by the President of Kenya. That's number one. Number two, I would have expected that lawyers and other people that are users of this particular system to be advocating for how we can be able to put barriers rather than blocking it or rather than stopping it. So I am against those who are advocating cyber to be closed. Number two, I witnessed something yesterday, something that I actually took pictures, and I cannot be able even to put it on the internet. And this is something that was pertaining to the life of Kenyans, and it was in a hospital. You can imagine, I witnessed it, I saw it, I called somebody, he witnessed, I called the management, they witnessed, and somehow now I cannot be able to bring it out. But if it was open like it was, then somebody would have seen it, then definitely somebody would have been, questioned. Why is it that this kind of thing is happening in a hospital?
Wow, thank you so much, Michael. Now, Dr. Mudhuri, he's mentioned a few things. First of all, he's put our lawyers on this, on the line, saying that lawyers, first, he's touched on the issue of public participation, which we earlier touched on, saying that this bill or now law shouldn't have been passed without Kenyans being involved. Your thoughts on that one, too, and that, especially as a lawyer?
I think we were quite involved in this. And actually,
as Kenyans?
No, as, well, let me say academia, civil society. We've written memorandums to Parliament, and I told you some of our recommendations were taken in, some not. Actually, the indictment has been on the media. So, like, you're coming very late in the conversation, whereas we've really, when we hold workshops to talk about data protection and we write press briefs and invite you to our workshops, you don't show up. It's not sexy enough, challenge, right?
We never participate in some of these
Exactly.
things. We always come in late. When law has been passed, then we start running up and down.
Yes, but we're doing a lot of what we do, like for us at the Center for IP and IT at Strathmore Law School. We are always interrogating these issues. Right now, we're heavy on data protection.
Right. And since we, like you mentioned, we came late into the conversation as specialists within this specific field, did you pinpoint that there are still a few loopholes and that this might cause infringement of freedom of speech? And then did you also table those issues prior?
Yes, this was a big debate, as I said, on the proposed section on false news, fake news and false publications. The concept in criminal law, which they've highlighted in their sector speak, is that there's a principle called nulla poena sin lege. Sin lege scripta, sin lege certa. That means, sorry, for the Italian. Let me explain.
For Kenyans, yes.
The idea is you cannot punish someone without defining the law or without writing it down. So criminal law is different from civil law, where judges are allowed to interpret laws and give breath to it. We're a common law jurisdiction. In civil law, if you're going to punish someone with a jail sentence or with a fine, it needs to be very well defined.
Not vague.
Yeah, and this has been the basis for declaring the previous provisions unconstitutional. So I don't know why we're going back, as he said, we're going back to that position. And we've highlighted these things. So as one of the callers talked about, we've talked about criminalization of journalistic processes is really not, is excessive. And even going back again to where we're coming from, the Budapest Convention, even the Council of Ministers, in 2007, which is 6 years after the law was passed, they said that, for instance, member states should not use vague terms when imposing restrictions on freedom of expression and information, especially in times of crisis. So you need to really define what are you talking about when you're saying incitement to violence. It needs to be set out clearly. The other issue that needed to have been given breath is, for instance, when you're intercepting data, especially content data. That's a big data privacy issue. You need to define the areas in which you need to limit where that is allowed. So you can say that's for terrorism purposes, or you can say that's for a cyber threat issue. Let's say our critical infrastructure is in danger or something like that. It should be spelled out properly, not just replicating the Budapest Convention verbatim.
No wonder no one has been jailed for hate speech, because it's that vague.
More with Thomas, Victor, and Dr. Mudhiri right after we come back from this short commercial break. Remember that our phone lines are open, so when we come back, we'd love to still hear more from you. We'll be right back.